Okay, cool. For those of you who don't know me or might not know me, my name is Oisín. I'm the co-founder of C23 Labs with Oscar and Cremo, an online education platform specifically for tattoo artists. And over the past 3 years, I've personally spoken to over 2,000 tattoo studios and tattoo artists about their social media, marketing, sales, and business skills. I've personally spent over $1 million on advertising spend on Meta and Google for tattoo studios. I've either personally taken, listened to, or read thousands of client and artist sales conversations, and in doing all of this have generated over $7 million in revenue for tattoo studios globally. So today in this video, I want to talk about how you can navigate your sales conversations in extreme detail. So in the past couple of videos that you hopefully watched, if you haven't, definitely check them out before. We talk about overcoming the manipulative stigma that you have around selling and sales. And secondly, we talk about your client's buying psychology. Now I want to take all of the information that I've taught you in the other videos and turn it into a really good in-depth conversation, sales conversation, and how to guide that conversation, what questions to use, when to pick up on hesitations. We're going to talk about all of that in this video. So the first thing I want to say is, going back to artist and introvert superpower, is not wanting to speak, right? Not wanting to do the selling, and we would rather just listen. The beautiful thing is, the best sales is 90% listening and 10% talking. Now this is not some number that I've pulled out of my ass. This is the number that I have come to the conclusion of, and other high-level salespeople, when analyzing thousands of sales conversations. The most effective conversations that ended up in a sale were 90% listening from the salesperson and 10% talking. Okay, so that's what you're naturally good at, right? Remember, your superpower as an artist is that you don't want to sell, right? You don't want to talk about anything. And great selling is listening to the client and letting the client come to their conclusion themselves, right? Coming to your conclusion themselves. So on that note, what I'm going to teach you in this video is not scripts, not set scripts, it's frameworks. And the reason for that is, as you probably know, every client conversation goes a completely different route. Okay, so if you kind of confine yourself to scripts, that's where the anxiety will come back in. Oh, they said something that's off script, what do I say next, right? No. The art of sales is listening and understanding your client. So I promise you, with these frameworks mixed with actively listening, the right thing will come to you in the moment to say, but only if you're actively listening and are present. So that's why we'll talk about frameworks, not scripts. So the form of sales that I like to do, the form of questions, the frameworks that I like to follow, all stem from something what's called Socratic questioning. So Socratic questioning stems from Socrates. If anyone doesn't know who Socrates was, he was a Greek philosopher who basically stood in the middle of the main Athens square and would stop people and strike up kind of discussions or conversations about things like leadership, virtue, what do you think of love, what do you think of politics, etc. And what Socrates would do is, once he got a very strong opinion said by the person with him, he would then ask them question after question and dig deeper and deeper and deeper until eventually that person realized that their opinion was kind of based on nothing and that they might have realized that they were wrong about a lot of things. Okay, and the reason it's called Socratic questioning is because Socrates never directly argued or discussed, right? He actually just asked people questions until they eventually came to the realization, after digging into their own mind, of how rational they were being. Now, fortunately, Socrates would be a great salesperson in this day and age, but asking, powerful people question after question and making them start to feel stupid with their own words doesn't get you clients, it gets you. So in this video, I'm not going to go into extreme detail on going through hundreds of client conversations. I'm going to teach you the main frameworks and the best questions that I've seen you can ask through Socratic questioning, and explaining in detail why these questions are so powerful, based on a lot of things that you've already probably learned in other videos. One of the most powerful questions you can ask a client or an inquiry, which is, what stopped you from getting this tattoo sooner? And we're talking about someone who has explained to you that they've been sitting on this tattoo idea for years or months, okay? You want to figure out what is really stopping them. Why have they been sitting on that idea for years if they really like it and they have money? What this question does is, it stops your client from saying a superficial answer and really getting into their own mind and saying out loud the real deep fear or hesitation or underlying question that they have around tattooing the process, their confidence, etc., that has been stopping them from making the commitment. And the reason we want to do that is, if you have that knowledge, then you can guide the conversation towards talking about that in more depth and making them realize that that fear is a bit irrational and they're making it scarier than it seems, etc., and helping them overcome that fear and gain that confidence because that is the main thing that's holding them back. If you remember from the previous video, there's fears and desires, and the fear is way more. So if you figure out what that is and you guide the conversation down that route, right? You hear that and you say, okay, let's dig deeper on this. They'll start to overcome it. They'll shift the perspective, and that will get you the sale more than anything else, more than talking about design, placement straight away, okay? That's why I love that question, because it really forces your client to talk about their biggest fear when it comes to getting a tattoo. The goal of these type of questions is to uncover what we call in sales objections. So in plain English, objections are reasons people would object to buying, right? Reasons, obstacles in people's way that they need to get over to buy, right? Stemming from the core beliefs again, as mentioned in the other video. But the goal of these questions is to figure out what that big objection, that big rock that's in their way for them to have the bravery to commit is. And just going back to the 6 core beliefs that people need in order to buy, as we spoke about in the previous video, which once again I would recommend you watch if you haven't, the 3 big rocks or objections or fears that people could have stem from these core beliefs, right? Support. Do they have support in their lives from family members, friends, co-workers, etc.? Trust. Do they have full trust in the artist, not just your work, as mentioned, but trust in you as a human, resonation with you as a human, and also trust that you're going to listen to what they really want and understand them. And then of course fear, which is the unique fears that people have about physical pain, about regretting it in 5 years. Once again, external judgment from others about what if it scabs from, bad stories that they've heard. So objections that people have in their mind stem from these. And objections are usually, they kind of sit as like a sentence in their mind. So an example of an objection that people are saying in their mind for support is, well, what if my coworkers, family, boss don't like it and I lose my job, or they judge me, or they perceive me as different? That's an objection, right? That's a sentence that they're saying in their mind that you want to figure out what that is through the sales conversation. For trust, it could be, what if, I go to an artist who doesn't listen to me and I get a horrible tattoo like I had with my previous artist, right? So they've had a bad previous experience. Because of that, they don't trust artists as much, or maybe they've just being fucked over in the past by friends or family, right? So they just don't trust people in general. But that's the sentence, the objection, What if it turns out wrong, or what if they don't listen to me and I get a horrible tattoo? That's the objection in their mind. And then for fear, it could be anything. What if I can't handle the pain? What if I regret it in 5 years? What if it scabs like my friends? What if my artist is a horrible person, right? All of these things. These are all objections or sentences that they have in their minds. And the goal of this Socratic questioning is to guide the conversation to where you eventually hear one of these sentences. They say it, and then you dig deeper on that and you help them realize that that's not the case with you, or that the pain isn't that bad, or that they've been sitting on this idea for years, and if they still have it, then of course they're not going to regret it in 5 years. What their real fear is that the judgment that they'll have from their friends, right? So you need to guide the conversation that way and help them realize that they're just being a little bit scared and irrational, which will give them the confidence and the trust in you, because you're the one who made them realize to buy with you. You're not selling anything, remember. You're not convincing anyone of anything. You're helping them convince themselves by questioning, by Socratic questioning. So once again, I don't like scripts, I like checklists. So here are the 4 things you should psychologically know about the client as a 4-part checklist that you want to check off. You're going to check off some of these before others, because every client conversation goes a different way, but you want to just guide the conversation and start to check these off one by one. By the way, if you're enjoying my content and you feel like you're learning something and you want to kind of get more personalized help with your marketing, your social media, psychology, client sales conversations, there's a link in the description, the first link below. You can actually apply to work with me one-on-one. So you'll get access to 40 plus hours of content on all of the stuff I talk about in detail. You'll have direct access to me in the DMs for any time. You can send me your content, sales conversations. And I do live calls every week where you can jump on, ask questions, and be part of a community that's, trying to figure out the same thing, which is the marketing side. So yeah, if that's interesting to you, you want to work with me a little bit more personally and get some more personalized help on your social media marketing and sales skills, you can click the first link in the description below and you can apply, and we'll talk soon. First thing on the checklist is fear. Okay, we want to figure out what the fear is. What is the biggest thing holding my clients back from committing? Then value. Do they understand the difference between price and value? Emotion. Do I know what's driving them to want this particular tattoo? What is the significance for them for this tattoo? And then ideal artist. What are they really looking for in an artist? Other than work, what do they need to see in an artist to trust them the most? And once again, some people are going to open up the conversation asking you about the price, right? And that's where you want to navigate that conversation away from price versus value, so you can check off that value part of the checklist, okay? Some people will reach out and tell you their deepest, darkest fears straight away. So you want to overcome that fear first, right? You want to check that off, okay? Some people will tell you they've had a bad experience in the past with artists. So you want to ask them, Another great Socratic question is, what made you reach out to me in particular? What are you looking for in an artist? Okay. The reason I love what made you reach out to me in particular is if you feel the conversation isn't going anywhere, or you feel like they're starting to get defensive, or you know that they've had a bad experience in the past from what they said, you want to recenter that conversation back to them saying and reminding themselves out loud as to why they reached out to you. What do they value in you? Why did they reach out in the first place? Because that gets them excited again. That gets them realizing, oh yeah, I do want to talk to this person. So that's how you can use that question to check off artists. What are they looking for in an artist, okay? When people say, yeah, I've been waiting, what's been stopping you from getting this tattoo? Oh, I've just been waiting to find the right artist. Oh, okay, right artist. What in particular are you looking for in an artist? Okay, and you start to figure out what that is, and then you can paint yourself as that ideal artist, okay? If someone wants an artist to be, funny or outgoing or non-judgmental, you can act then, once they've said that, in a funny, calm, non-judgmental way. If they want someone to talk about deep philosophical things, and you like that too, then you start to guide your client interaction that way, right? But you need to know what type of artist they're looking for so you can play the part. And if you're not that part and you don't want to do the tattoo, etc., you pass them off to someone else. That's how you'll never feel like you're selling, as I said. But once again, that is the sales checklist that I always follow in a conversation. So not script, the checklist. Do I know their fear? Do they understand price versus value? Okay. Do I know the emotional driving them behind this tattoo? Like, do I know why they want this tattoo and the significance? And then do I know what they're really looking for in an artist, to trust an artist? So the best way to guide this conversation is obviously not to continuously ask these questions one by one, because then they will feel like they're being interrogated, right? You want it to feel like a natural conversation. And the way that you do that is you act naturally, right? You don't just ask them conversation over conversation like a police investigation. So what I like to teach artists and what I like to use myself personally is what's called the ACA framework. So your reply to a client is going to contain ACA. So A, the first A is acknowledge what they said. C, compliment a characteristic trait of them or compliment their idea. And then A is ask a Socratic guiding question. So we don't ask the question straight away over and over again, because that will feel, once again, like an interrogation. We want to acknowledge what they said. We want to compliment so it feels like a natural conversation. And then we slip in that question so it feels like it's just naturally flowing that way. I'll give you an example of what I would reply to if someone said, hey, I want this design, what would be the price? Now, remember, we want to make sure that they understand the difference between price and value. So we want to steer that conversation away from the price and more towards the value that you bring, which is your understanding of them, your genuine care and interest in their idea. And then from that moment on, they will start to really understand, okay, this is why they might be more expensive. So how to use the ACA in that reply. So I would say, hey, John, of course I can give you a price for this, right? So we're acknowledging what they said. We don't want to just avoid that conversation, right? Because they're going to feel like you're avoiding. They'll see that. So we want to acknowledge that they asked for the price. Hey, John, of course I can give you a price for this. I just need to ask you 2 quick questions to give you the most accurate one. Okay, so now we're saying basically the Socratic questions that I'm about to ask you, it's to give you a more accurate price. So now John is more open to answering your questions in detail because he feels that it's for you to give him a better price. Okay, now obviously we're going to steer it away, but you acknowledge what he said so that he feels heard. Then you want to compliment him or his idea. So here we'll compliment his idea, for example. By the way, this is a beautiful XYZ idea. How did you come up with this idea? And then we ask that Socratic guiding question, right? How did you come up with this idea? The reason I like to do it this way is because it feels natural. So you're saying, hey, yeah, I'd love to give you a price. I just need to ask you 2 quick questions. And then you kind of go off on a tangent. By the way, this is a lovely idea. Like, I'm getting sidetracked, even though we know what we're doing. Getting sidetracked. How did you come up with this? And then John starts to talk about how he came up with it, which gives you the ability to check off that emotional significance, okay? And then when you get a good reply from John, if it's superficial, you want to touch a bit more in depth on what he said. Let's say, oh, I just think it's cool. Okay, amazing. Yeah, I think it's amazing, cool too. I'm curious to know what in particular you find the coolest, right? So you want to dig a bit deeper, right? Because he's not giving us a good answer. And then he'll open up, okay? Then once we've checked off that emotional significance in this example, we can say, oh, wow, well, you've clearly put a lot of thought into this design, so we're acknowledging what he said. I really admire that you take a lot of time to make decisions well. So now we're complimenting a characteristic that he has. We're also, labeling him with the characteristic trait we want him to have in the future of this conversation, which is you think about your decisions well. So you don't go to the cheapest, right? You're going to understand price versus value. So we're lining him up subconsciously to act in accordance with the person we want him to be. And we're also complimenting him. So as we said, wow, you clearly put a lot of thought into this. I admire that you take a lot of time to make your decisions. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this. How long have you had this idea? And then he says, oh, 2 years. Okay, boom. Now we're going to get into the fear. Okay, wow, 2 years. I completely relate to that. I always think it's better to make a longer decision rather than a quick one. What stopped you from getting this tattoo 2 years ago or a year ago? Why are you only reaching out now? Okay, boom. Now we're getting into the fear conversation. We're figuring out, right? So you can see we're listening to what they're saying. We're naturally guiding that conversation using the ACA so it feels like a natural conversation, right? So we're not just interrogating, and we're checking off these bits one by one. So then when you eventually drop the price at the end of that DM conversation, right, for example, which you should drop the price because remember, you promised you would and he asked for it. What happens though is that John is having such a good time talking about his idea and talking to you, he forgets to even ask about the price. So the beautiful thing is when you recenter the conversation back to the price, they trust you even more because they're like, oh wow, they could have just avoided that, but they brought it back. So then when you drop the price, the last thing that's going to be checked off, for example, in that scenario, is price versus value. They're now going to value you more because of that conversation you've had with them. They're going to feel understood and listened to. They're going to trust you. So then when you drop that expensive price in comparison to some cheap people, the question in John's mind is not, I can't afford this. The question is, how can I afford this? How can I find the money to go with this artist? Because this is my artist. So that's how you can use Socratic questioning and the ACA framework to make your clients come to the realization that you are the right artist for them without selling anything. And I think I've gone on long enough on this video, so I'll leave it there. But that's how you can use Socratic questioning and your client's own psychology against them to guide that conversation to what you really want it to be. And once again, you're not convincing anyone of anything. You're not selling anything, right? You're just seeking to understand your client, and through that, they will trust you. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, as always. And if you want to be personally mentored on your sales skills, your marketing skills, your client conversations, and your business strategy in general, you can click the first link in the description below. You can apply to book a call with me, basically to work one-on-one. You'll get access to hours and hours of course content that's not on YouTube. You'll get weekly group calls. You'll also have access to me in the DMs every day, which you can send me client conversations. You can send me your social media videos that you've made, reels. I can give you tips on them. But yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, you'd like to work with me more personally one-on-one, you can click the link in the description below, apply, and maybe we'll talk soon. But once again, see you in the next video.